So a lot of people, Catholics, complain about the crisis of the church. We have issues with pedophile priests, Catholics who are lukewarmers, as well as cafeteria Catholics. We lament about Europe losing their faith. And so one of the biggest issue is what is the central cause of this loss of faith? And what I realized is that it's the family. That Satan has taken another route of destroying the church, trying to destroy the church, I should say, and that is through the family. And the critical part about families is the fact that if you don't have holy families, you won't have holy priests. You won't have holy religious. And so the foundation of the Catholic Church is the family. Hello, this is David Cease. In today's episode, I'm here at Catholic Family Land, and I'm here with my friend, Kim Dax. We've known each other for 9 years, and we're going to talk about the 4 points that Catholic Family Land talks about here, and these 4 points are sin, holiness, grace, and consecration. We're going to be talking about these 4 points and how they are the most powerful way to convert a family to become holy so that we can rebuild our church.
Welcome to another episode of Practical Catholic with David Cease. Practical Catholic is a spiritual coaching show to help you find peace, love, and joy in family and work life. We are here each and every week to help you grow spiritually, to become successful in this life, and to be a saint for the life after.
My story begins with more about Jerry and Gwen Conacher. So this is not about me, but about the founders of Catholic Family Land. I want to tell 2 stories because I think they really tell you exactly why holiness is important. The first story is about Jerry and Gwen's fight against sex education. At that point, they had, I believe, 7 to 8 children, and they were going to school in high school. Some of them were going there. And there was a movement in the school for them to teach sex education. And so Jerry Conacher, who was a very dynamic man, very strong man, knew this was wrong. And so he got a petition going to end this sex education. So during he had tons of people signing the petition. Majority of his town did not want to have sex education in the schools. And when he went to the school board to show this petition, the school board basically said, "We don't care. We don't care about this petition. We're going to make a decision, and that decision is we are going to teach sex education," and pretty much jam it down the kids' throats. And that's when it dawned on Jerry Conacher that the fight against the world is not political, it's not academics, it's purely spiritual. It's a spiritual battle. But at that time, he didn't really know how to fight this spiritual battle. In the meantime, another pivotal thing would happen, but in this case, it would happen to Gwen Conacher. Gwen Conacher got into a car accident in which the woman she hit was killed. She was a young woman, and this impacted Gwen very much, realizing what is the purpose in our lives. And so they would go to Fatima, Portugal, and I believe they spent several years there. In fact, Jerry thought he could start a business there and actually live there for the rest of his life. But his business wasn't taking off, and it wasn't doing well. So eventually, his spiritual director said, well, maybe it's time for you to go back to America and see what you can do there. So while they were in Portugal at Fatima, their spirituality and their strength increased more and more. How couldn't it when you're next to Our Lady of Fatima? But they took a deep meaning behind it. So if you know anything about Fatima, Fatima have the Holy Family. One of the visions that they saw there was the Holy Family. And they brought that impression back here in America, and they knew that they had to become holy. Families needed to be holy. And so they created these 4, I would call almost principles, even though they're called parts. They're really principles. And that is, and it's very basic, sin is the cause of all the evil in the world. It's not guns. It's not, psychiatry. It's basically sin. This is why sin is so evil. So they realize that. But how do we combat sin? What is it that combats sin? And that is grace. Grace is what combats sin. But, doctrine will tell us that, by being baptized, by being confirmed, by going to the Eucharist, even daily, and going to confession, you receive graces. Then why don't we have less sin? I go to daily Mass every day, but I keep sinning. I know a lot of people who go to daily Mass and keep sinning. I know a lot of people who pray, but keep sinning. So why is it that these graces aren't covering them? Because graces don't affect anything. Graces are dormant in ourselves. Even if I were to go to Mass every single day, even if I were to go to confession every day, even if I'm baptized and confirmed, graces are dormant inside of me until I use them. And the way that I use them is to become holy. Holiness taps into that grace so that we can become virtuous, that we can work on our weaknesses, our deficiencies, that we can detach from our own ideas, our own things that make us so earthly here that we want to get it our way. So holiness, that's the third part. And how do we begin this journey of holiness? How do we begin it? Through consecration. Consecration begins it and will also lead us the path to it. Why? Because consecration, and the consecration I'm here talking about is, in Gwen and Jerry Conacher, was the St. Louis de Montfort's consecration. The totus tuus, totally your consecration to Our Lady. Everything to Christ through Our Lady. It is a 30, if you ever do the 33 days of morning glory, that's the same consecration. So this journey of holiness begins with consecration. And not only does it begin, but it also endures. Why? Because there's only one perfect Christian that ever existed and walked on this earth, and that is Our Lady. Our Lady is the par excellence of Christianity. But she's not only just an example of Christianity, like all the other great saints, but she is, in effect, our mother. Why? Because once we were baptized into Christ, we became part of Christ. And who gave birth to Christ? But Our Lady. And the love and devotion to Our Lady will make everything perfect. I think one of the greatest love in this world is a love between a mother and her children. And in this case, a mother towards her son. So Our Lady not only is a great example, but she actually helps us to become that great saint. She helps us, and she will endure all the sufferings to make us like her son. She will mold us. Who made Christ? Who made Jesus on this earth? Who actually physically made her? Our Lady. Who taught Jesus? Our Lady. And who cared for Jesus? Our Lady. So when she sees us, she doesn't see a David or Kim. She sees Jesus, because all of us has Jesus in us, and that's what we are called to be, another Christ. So consecration is one of the most important things. So what I'd like to do is talk about consecration first, because it's one of those things that maybe a lot of people haven't heard about and know about, but it's very easy to do. And I'm going to put Kim here on the spot, and I'm going to ask him the question, okay? Have you ever done the consecration?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kim. Yes, the consecration. And so I don't know, when did you do your consecration?
It was actually before Catholic Family Land the first time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah.
That is great.
With a men's group, a local men's group.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, so the Lakovits, our next door neighbors, it was amazing because they were actually finishing their consecration the day that they arrived.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So you and the Lakovits are actually way ahead of we were, because it actually took us a couple of times to go through Catholic Family Land. I mean, I had done the consecration myself individually, but as a family, my wife was kind of like hemming and hawing, should we do this? Shouldn't we do? How do we do it with the kids and all this other stuff? And so it actually took us, I think we didn't do it until, I want to say, the 5th or 6th week. So we've been doing this for 11 years. So we actually didn't do the family consecration until, I think it was like the 5th or 6th fest, And so it was really important. I did the consecration a long time ago. In fact, that was one of the most important thing that actually helped me convert and become a Christian. Not a Christian, but revert back to the Catholic Church. I was always a Catholic, but I had left and then came back. And it's a beautiful consecration. It's actually very short, but there's a 33-day preparation that you do. It's a set of prayers, very simple, very easy to do, and it really is very powerful. I don't know. When you did your consecration, did you feel a change? Maybe not like immediately, but I mean, you felt yourself kind of drawn more towards Our Lady, drawn more towards wanting to become a better Christian, right? Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Absolutely. So, I guess I was hit over the head by a 2x4 because
we all are.
At some point in time we need it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so very early on in a men's group in Dousman, Wisconsin, we would gather early in the morning, 6 a.m. and during Lent they had a priest available for confession.
Yeah.
And this was before my consecration, but one morning I went to confession, and I confessed my sins, one of which I was struggling with a very common and deadly sin that men experience.
Yeah, we all do.
Amen.
Yeah.
And I remember I went face to face, and I remember Father sitting across from me, and literally,
Go ahead.
Literally, he felt uncomfortable based on my confession. I recall he stood up, or he sat up in his chair rather, and he kind of pulled down on his vestments, and he looked at me, and he said, "You need to go to Mary." And it was the first time that I had heard in my life really a call to go to Mary. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I immediately went into the church proper, and there was a beautiful statue of Mary there. I remember, and I knelt down and I prayed, and I didn't understand the full ramification of what I had just experienced, but really, I had experienced the dramatic grace involved, and the true the true asking of Mary to intercede for me and in my life and help me through this pitfall, this terrible pitfall that I was experiencing. She had a tremendous impact on me and intercessed for me at a very important time in my life. And it's almost like the consecration then was a response to her intercession. Almost, I felt indebted to her that for the goodness and the love and the care that she wrapped me in bringing me into a closer relationship with Christ, a relationship that was severed at that very day.
Oh, that's great. I like the word that you said, indebtedness. One of the response to holiness is that, and for me, is not an indebtedness, not like a loan or something like that, but more like there's a response, because someone has helped you so much. And that's the point I want to say is consecration helps people. Okay, I don't know how many people have been converted by the consecration or has overcome, some kind of deadly sin or whatever. But it's really, really important that when they realize that someone that Our Lady actually helps, they feel kind of indebted. Like, oh my goodness, this is, I have a response to do something, to love her even more, to love her son even more. And then through that love, she helps you even more. As I said before, the greatest love that is ever out there is a love between a mother and her children, and most importantly, a mother through her son, and that's Our Lady. And when we were baptized into Christ, she sees us as another Christ, okay? Because we were actually baptized into her, and she gave birth to Jesus. So she's there to help us, no matter what kind of sin we have or anything that goes on. She can definitely help us, and so because of that, we just want to be a better and better and better Christian. She is the par excellence of all Christians, right? She is the most perfect Christian out of all. But not only is she a perfect Christian, but she also helps us out. So consecration, to me, was very important. And consecration is the beginning of the road to holiness. So let's talk about holiness, okay? And about how, holiness, comes along. Now, with me, this is how I, handle holiness and how I envision holiness is. The first is the idea that God has created your journey already. He's created from beginning to end. He knows you, and He's created that. So everything that is happening right now and will happen, okay, He has created just for you and only you. It's handcrafted. We have handcrafted beer. It's handcrafted holiness, okay?
That's an original analogy.
Exactly.
Yes. Very good.
Yes. So it's, we only drink a root beer here, though.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
But it's handcrafted, right? So it's a handcrafted holiness. And so every day I have to say, you know what? God did this for me, and He knows that's best for me. Like, for example, I own a business, and so I might have a deal, a large deal that, I put my heart, sweat, and tears over, and I feel like they're going to sign on the dotted line, and I'm going to get this big deal. And at the last minute, they say no, right? And I would be crushed, right? But God, for some odd reason, said no. He's the one that willed that to be no. And that might either be because it's not going to help me to become holy, or maybe it was something that the no will make me holy. So I'm a tertiary, and I have these friars. So I do this thing called Day with Mary, where it's a one-day retreat, and I need all these priests and everything. and they're always late. We have this thing called Franciscan time, right? It's beyond humanistic time, right? And they're always late. They're always like half hour, 45 minutes late. And so meanwhile, you're like, all nervous, like when is this priest going to show for mass or for confession or whatever? So they come and they're late, and they're usually like, and you're panicking, and you're like, you guys are late. And they walk in all holy, and they go, God wills that we be late. And you're just totally like, I'm like, David wills that you go to confession right now because I want you to go to confession.
I got to use that one.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that one a lot.
David wills.
I like that one.
But in the beginning it used to annoy me, right? But in the end, I use it now. So when I don't make those deals, and when I don't get those deals, or something happens that's suffering, I just say, God wills that we're there. So the other day I used it for my kids. The kids are like, "Your dad, we're going to be late for this party." I'm like, God wills we be late for this party.
And their response was?
Their response was, don't want to say.
Maybe a little beep, beep. Roll in the eyes.
Yeah, exactly. So really, but it is. Because if we believe that God handcrafted this holiness, then God does will that, that certain sufferings occurs. The other is that I always put in there is that every suffering that is there is to make you holy, right? Is to really make you holy. And that if you just make that right choice, you kind of make that holiness that's there. And then the third I always say is that there are saints and there are saint makers. And sometimes we're both, right? But so when you get those angry people, or you get these people that do all these crazy things, I always look at them and say, they're a saint maker. They're trying to make me a saint, because so many people say, oh, they're there to annoy me. And I'm like, no, God put them in front of you because they want you to be a saint. So that's how I view, kind of holiness to help me out and stuff. What about you, Kim? What do you do?
Yeah. So one of the, I think it was Father Michael Gately that talked about how holy life. He started, how do you have a holy life? And he broke it down and basically broke it all the way down and saying it really comes down to holy moments, stringing together consecutive holy moments over some period of time, over a day, and then we can mark that as a holy day in our life, right? And then continues to do it over and over and over. And as we do that, as we talked about earlier, that is continuing to build virtue and is bolstering our desire and our disposition to be holy men and women, right? So what I try to do is it's real. I find it's very easy to be holy to everyone out there. I have customers that, have a complaint and, okay, I'll take care of that for you, $163, whatever it is. We'll just send that part, I can be holy. That's no problem. I have friends, that are struggling a little bit and I'll do this or I'll do that for them or I'll say this or I'll say that and I can be the holiest man of the planet, in that particular situation. But then we all kind of boil it down when we come home, right? The domestic church. And that's really where is the kiln for our holiness, right? And that's where we perfect our holiness. And what I personally try to do is I try to create those holy moments. So I have to actually take a step back at times. May be just a nanosecond, but I take a step back and I think about the situation and I think I have a decision to make here. Okay. Am I going to respond in out of holiness in a way that is going to lead me in a closer relationship with Christ and the person that I'm talking to, whether it's my wife or my children, or am I going to take two steps back on this path of holiness and and do maybe what the evil one would rather have me do at that moment. And I'm not always successful, and sometimes I think that the holy thing to do doesn't turn out to be the holy thing. So it's a learning situation, right?
Yes.
So sometimes it's not intentional, or we think we choose right, but we still take those steps back. We learn, and we grow, and we continue on that path that God has for us.
Yeah.
Some of the sights and sounds of Catholic Family Land. This is a joyous place.
Yes.
Thank you.
I love what you said, Kim. Actually, now I have 4 points right that you said. You're just chock full of knowledge right now. I think the Holy Spirit is working through you right now.
Oh, wonderful.
So the first point, was excellent, is that it's very easy to be holy outside your family.
Yeah.
It was that expression, street angel, but devil home or something. Devilish home. But it's the home that's the most difficult, right, and the most challenging. And I think a couple of reasons why is, one is that that's where Satan wants you to fail, right? That he wants you to fail because he knows it's the domestic church, as you mentioned. And the second is, I think that, and I see this often, is a lot of wives and husbands run away from their home to chase after people they think they get along with. Do you ever see those people who they say we never got married because we didn't want to ruin our relationship? So there's something about marriage that as soon as you get married, the devil wants to get at you because he knows that that's a sacrament. He knows that's what's in it.
So true.
The second is, I love what you said about holy moments that you choose that's in there, and that is and that proves that holiness is a choice. You can choose the devil's will, or you can choose to do something that's holy. So it's a choice. And it's also a habit. Once you start making some good choices, then hopefully that will be the path of holiness. And then the third that you mentioned was the fact that you kind of experiment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We make mistakes.
We make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that one of the things you said, what you thought was holy was actually maybe not holy, and everything else. And that's why we do have confession, right?
Amen.
Because we learn through experience. We learn through trial and error. And so we can learn how to become holy right from our falls, just as much as from our falls, as much as our successes. And so you can even see that in great saints. The great saints fell, and they picked themselves up. So holiness is not, in the fourth point, holiness is not you get it or you don't, okay? It's some kind of 2 + 2 = 4. You really need to, it's that life experience and that channel that goes in there. I remember I was talking to one of my spiritual director, and he had a great talk about choosing a spiritual director. And he said one of the things that's important to understand about spiritual directors and choosing one is that you can't choose a young priest. And he said the reason why is because they don't have enough experience in this journey of holiness. Okay? They might have objective truth and knowledge and all the other stuff, but it's that trial and error part, that wisdom of the experience that they lack. And so to get a really good spiritual director, you actually need someone who is older. Okay? Now, I'm not saying the guy has to be 80 years old or something like that, but certainly he can't be a newly ordained priest that's in their 20s or even early 30s. It's someone who's experienced this path to holiness and realized there's a lot of trial and error. Because if you have a young priest who just bases spiritual direction over objective truths, they're going to usually be a lot harsher than the experience of a wise man or a wise priest who knows that part of holiness is a trial basis, and doing that. So, excellent points on that aspect. So, holiness. So, let's talk about grace, because ultimately, to become holy, we have to tap on the graces. And one of the sacraments that we use to receive these graces is the sacrament of marriage. Now, I rarely use that I should say, and we'll go into that one sacrament, but a little bit later. But in that sacrament, it's there to help you to overcome all the difficulties, whether it be financial, spiritual, or physical, due to illness or whatever. And yet, the divorce rate in America, even amongst Catholics, is 55%. Mm-hmm. So certainly the graces are there, but these people aren't using it, and doing that. But one of my favorite sacrament to receive graces is the sacrament of confession. I go pretty frequently. Part of it is because I'm a tertiary. And so I go every other week. So how often do you go, and how do you use it? And, tell me a little bit about your confession and everything and how it works.
Sure, David. Most important thing for me with confession is to make it routine. So there is a monthly men's group that meets close to us, and there's a group of men that meets once a month on a Saturday morning, and we begin with Mass, and we say the Rosary, and then of course confession's available before we have a nice little breakfast, and then a guest speaker. But the heart of the matter, of course, is Mass and the confession. So I make a habit of going on that first Saturday of the month, every month. And if for some reason I can't get to it, I will either, make a point to go before that Saturday or immediately following that Saturday. So first and foremost, it's got to be routine. I can't have to think about it or say, well, maybe I could put this off a week or blah, blah, blah. That doesn't work. It's got to be routine. It's been absolutely unbelievable for me personally to help me move past many personal demons or personal hang-ups that I have. The sacrament has been so powerful to me to really change my life. It's been the main vehicle that I've used to amend my life and to put things back in a rightful order. And as we just talked about, especially in our home, especially in my relationship with my wife, especially in my relationship with my children. And we so desperately need this. And because of that sacrament and the graces involved, not only, feed me and nurture me on this path of holiness, but also it affects me in terms of how I respond, to my children. We were just talking about those taking advantage of those opportunities for a holy moment. It all has come together for me. And it is all the bedrock of those changes in my life has been this sacrament. No question about it.
Yeah, I picked up on one thing. You're attracted to food. That's why you went to confession, right? Because you have breakfast all the time.
Big time.
Big time. So now that's how we attract people to confession. No.
You know what? You want to get people there, you just put a little food out there.
Exactly.
You put food in your agenda. Right.
After Mass and then before confession.
Exactly.
A couple of points that I think that were excellent, Kim. One was that it's a great way to change who you are. One of the biggest things of holiness is knowing that you have faults. Humility is always the first step to holiness. And humility is really just an assessment of who you are, your strengths and your weaknesses. And confession helps you realize that. But let me ask you a question. What do you say to people who, whether it be mortal, venial, whatever sin it is, that keep doing it? Okay. Sometimes people have this idea like, I keep doing this sin over and over again, and it feels like confession isn't helping me or whatever. I've had sin that literally lasted me 7-10 years before I had to get rid of it. What do you say to people like that? I'm sure you probably have sins that you keep repeating over and over again and stuff. What do you say to people who are like, well, I get tired of it. It doesn't do me any good. You know what I'm saying?
What I invite them to go deeper. Mm-hmm. Go deeper. I think, it seems to me that they haven't really entered into the experience, that they've remained somewhat on the perimeter of the sacrament. Maybe they're holding something back. but to go deeper. I know something that really was important to me in terms of my journey with the sacrament was a really good examination of conscience.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Right.
It is.
And I think we've seen, seen, exam lights, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I remember, just a card, it's like, and there's like, 10 questions on there or something like that, and it's like, have you killed someone today?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm good there,
Yeah.
But I mean, when you really, really look at a good exam, it draws you in, and it forces you in a grace-filled way to look in the mirror at things that you've never seen, that you've never looked at before.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I think we've all heard the analogy where you're living a life separated from God or moving away toward God, and you're driving and you're looking through this clear windshield. It's a beautiful day. Hey, everything's fine, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that blending in the consecration, I think analogously for me, the consecration was like taking my hands off the wheel and letting Mary guide my heart toward Christ, right?
Well, that's great. That's
great. Right. So now that car turns into the light, turns into the sun, and of course, what do we see through that windshield? We see all the imperfections of the windshield, right?
Great analogy.
So I mean, and I think a good exam does that.
Yes.
And I know there were several things. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. I'd never realized this. I'd never gone there before.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I mentioned to especially men who are struggling or sometimes they make offhanded comments and slightly derogatory comments and we're called that's a holy moment. That's an opportunity for holiness.
Yes.
And we need to help this person get on the right path. So arming them with maybe the right tools and helping them turn into the light to see more imperfections or see the greater depth of sin that fests within us.
Yes.
And another great example that we've all heard is the idea of a cancer, right? There's a spot. I happen to have a little wart on my hand. Yeah, David can see it here, but and it's just kind of funny because actually I'm trying to get rid of it, and I'm kind of wondering, is it a wart? Because the common medicine doesn't even work.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's an analogy there. It's like, am I trying to put a Band-Aid over my sin, right? And all of a sudden, this hasn't happened, but I suppose it could happen if it was something worse. Let's say it was cancer, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, little spots. Whatever. I'll deal with that later.
Right,
and all of a sudden, it overtakes us, right?
Yeah.
And so, what are those little things? What are those little things in life that are holding us back?
Yeah. Excuse me. I love your analogy of the windshield because, we drove here 8 hours. My windshield has nothing but bug stuff all over it. So it definitely needs to be cleaned. But I think that was a perfect analogy. I thought that was really great because in the dark, it doesn't feel like your windshield's that dirty. But when you go into the light, it is dirty and it is messy. And I love your analogy that, Our Lady is, pointing us towards the light. So, excellent point. Another excellent point is a good examination of conscience. I know so many of us, we go to confession and we're like, okay, I haven't killed someone. Yeah. I haven't lied, I guess, totally, but, that's okay. Right. But a good one and taking the time to do that is really, really good. Mm-hmm. But I think I also want to add is that sometimes our sins we have to struggle with, and it takes time.
Yes.
It takes time for us to overcome our sins because grace is not grace doesn't manipulate you to become holy. Mm-hmm. Grace allows you and strengthens you to become holy. Mm-hmm. So, but sometimes through our weakness and other things, we fall, right? Mm-hmm. And we need to get back on the horse and go in there. I love your the being on a schedule. It's very, very important to have a schedule because it's very easy to make an excuse to say, I can't make it today or I can't do this.
Or even I haven't sinned. I mean, to think,
right, exactly.
Because the evil one wants us, right? You're fine. Right. Yeah. You're fine. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. And I think one of the byproducts of confession is peace. Would you say that?
Amen, David.
Yeah, I mean,
huge.
It's huge. It's huge. You know, I look at it and say, how can a man walk around with a guilty conscience for not just days, but we're talking weeks and years? And that's why people get so self-absorbed, because they're walking around with a guilty conscience. Okay? You know, I know that I had anger management issues, and it took me a while to kind of overcome that. And, you know, I'd be yelling at my kids, and, you know, sometimes I'd be a little too rough with my kids. And I go to confession, and it would almost like reset myself. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that like it was acceptable, my behavior was bad. But what happens is it's a new start. Mm-hmm. And you start with a good conscience, and now you're starting to be holy and do holy acts. So that peace comes with with a conscience that's been purged, okay? And so that's the way you want to be, and that's the path to holiness, right? Is a guiltless conscience. So the other one I like to talk about is the Holy Eucharist. You know, the Catholic Church says source and summit of all, even in fact of all the sacraments. You know, if the confession gives us peace, okay, or brings us peace, you know, because of washing of our guilty conscience, then the Eucharist maintains that peace. It feeds off that peace. I probably only miss Mass maybe once or twice a year, and I know when I miss it, you know, for one reason or another, because my behavior is so much different. You know, about you with the Eucharist.
Oh, and I know you're talking about weekday, you know, daily Mass.
Daily Mass. Right. Yes, not Sunday Mass.
I know you will. I think your listeners are.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, so I agree totally. Yeah. It's like, it's again, you know, it's like the foundation of your day, and everything permeates. If that's the source and summit of our faith life, it's also the source and summit of our day.
Oh, excellent!
Right?
Yes.
Right? And every movement and every thought, you know, everything we look at, you know, what we see, what we touch, what we feel, what we think, everything permeates then from that experience to start our day.
Yes. I don't know about you, and I know you have your own business, and so do I. But I really do pray for my employees, and I think about my employees, even my daily routine, what I need to get done, not like during Mass in a sense of distraction, but in a sense to ask God, give me the wisdom, help me out. Am I doing this right? Am I doing it wrong? Especially right after receiving the Eucharist. I sometimes think about work and what I have to get done, and just offer up that day, but just kind of also say, give me the wisdom, you know, maybe I hate to say this, but fire someone, right? Or, you know, maybe I have to make a decision whether, you know, we go this direction or that direction. And I just find that when I do that, I feel more at peace with my decisions at work, or even family life. You know, I don't know how many times I've thought about, you know, my children when they're having problems, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. But one of the things that you said is that I love what you said, source and summit of our day, and it really is. It just sets I go in the morning, so for me it just sets the tone of the day. And I hate to say this, but like towards the end of the day, I'm like a beaten up, worn rag, you know, because I'm all happy and go lucky in the beginning because I just had this great Mass and everything else and scripture and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden the day just wears me out. And then the next day begins the whole cycle again. But that's why I go, because of that reason.
And something simple, just like making it routine, but going early. I know I have a 6 a.m. Mass. I think you go early as well. And it's like, okay, so now we have to get to bed on time, right?
Yes.
Right? And we know that things can slide in our day, right? Our will slides and our resolve slides. And sometimes the best thing we can do is go to bed and get up and get back on the horse and begin that day with Mass.
Exactly. exactly. We do miss it sometimes, or we go and stuff.
Sure.
But don't let that devastate you or anything like that, and and just get back on the horse. So we talked about consecration, the beginning of holiness. We talk about becoming holy, and then we talk about the sacrament, the graces that are there. So now, what's really left now is sin. Right, it's the fourth point of Catholic Family Land, which is sin. I think in a world where psychology is involved, where we have all these experts and we have Google, I really think that one of the worst things we've ever done is we've explained away sin. Okay, we basically explained away sin. Sin has now been explained away. Sin doesn't exist. It's just, it's a psychological issue, right? That's what it is. It's a psychological issue. So recently we've had all these shootings going on, right? And so by no means am I an NRA guy or anything like that. I'm a former military, so I'm very well astute on that. But guns have been around. Take for example the M16, right? I'm a military guy. The M16 was invented in the mid-'60s. The AR-15 has been around. So it's been around for a good almost 50 years, okay? Now, these mass shootings have occurred probably in the last 20 years, okay? Let's say 20 years it's been occurring, and they've been escalating. Well, the AR has been around for 50 years. What has transpired? What has been going on? Now, we try to explain it away. The gun is the issue, right?
There were people back in the 60s and 70s.
50 years ago, people had guns on their gun, on their trucks, and they had all these things, and they didn't have these mass shootings, right? So what has happened? I'll give you my take, and then I'll give you time to talk to you about. It's sin, ultimately, and it's not just sin, but it's diabolical. If you listen to some of the reports of these people who have done these mass shootings, who survived, they will always tell you, "Oh, I heard voices." Well, what are these voices? What are these voices? Right? It's basically the diabolical. It's the devil, right? If you are living in a life of sin, the devil has a hold of you, and it's just going to escalate. So we've been really relying on modern science, to the point where it's too much, where they really got rid of sin and personal culpability, personal choice of that sin, right? Because sin is a choice, okay? Now, if it's forced upon you, it's a venial sin, but it's still sin. But it is a choice. And so I think that, sin is around, and we have to take grip of this, and only confession and all that can heal us from this sinful thing. So I'm going to give it to you. What do you think is the cause of all this stuff going on? Well,
I think most families, even my extended family, is impacted by mental illness, and I think that there's that element.
Oh, I agree. But
totally. Let's set that aside.
Yeah.
I mean that's a different topic, and that's something very, very real, and I think that's just something that we need to deal with compassionately in our world, right? Yes. But I think it comes right back around to what's going on, what happened with these people and their families. I mean,
yes.
We hear the stories, and you cannot believe what children are experiencing.
Yes.
And I mean, we exchange many stories, and we're sharing our faith journey together, and we share our struggles too.
Right.
But it ain't anything like what's going on out there.
I totally agree.
And there's things that are totally devastating to families. But certainly, coming back right around to what you said is, the devil has infiltrated our families.
Yes.
Through fathers and husbands, through mothers and wives, and what we're seeing is really a degradation of the domestic church in our country, certainly in our world.
Yeah.
And what's the answer to that? It's fixing the family.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the authorities in our country don't see it that way.
Yeah.
They just don't see it that way.
Well, I mean, I think the authorities they just pour money into it.
Right.
Right. They think a good house, Medicare, and all this stuff will fix everything. Right.
Sure.
When in reality, what the crisis of the family is really sin. Sin is because whatever Medicare is not going to fix sin.
No.
Inner cities, their fathers are leaving. If you look at the inner cities, and I talk to a lot of people with the inner cities, what's the crisis of the inner city? The lack of fatherhood. It's the lack of fatherhood. Why is there a lack of fatherhood? Because there's a high promiscuity rates. So you have these guys that are just having sex with these women, impregnating them, and not having a marriage and being married and committed. This is what sin does. That's the destruction of the family right there. So we know what the effects of places like Chicago and Detroit, because they're lacking fathers. That's what they are. You look at even in other areas of America where fathers are leaving the family. Why are they leaving? Because of sin, adultery. So sin was destroying the family. All right, not because they lack Medicare, because they lack all these things. It's because people are very selfish. Sin is nothing more than selfishness. That's really what it is. You become selfish, and all they do is they care about themselves. So the man who wants to have sex and impregnates these women, he doesn't want to take care of the kids. No. He doesn't want to be a committed father or anything like that. So you have things like abortion. That's a sin. Right, and I'm not saying here that it could be all sins can be forgiven, because I don't want to think that women who have abortion are evil or bad. We have to understand it is a sin, and they need to be forgiven, and it needs to stop, because ultimately that child, believe it or not, will actually help you if you have that child and help that mother. So sin is the cause of all the wars and all of the division in our family. And I'm quoting that specifically because that's one of the songs that we sing at Catholic Family Land. At the end of Mass, we sing this beautiful song. I believe it's about 4 verses. And each verse is very poignant about CFL's 4 parts, which is sin and grace and everything else. And the first part is just emphasizes that sin is the cause of all the wars and division in our family. And then it goes on and says, holiness and grace, and then consecration. And how consecration, we will consecrate our family and ourselves to bring that holiness in. It's a very beautiful song, and it's a traditional song that we always play.
Should we sing it for him?
I don't know all the lyrics, though. That's the only problem.
Oh, okay.
So
that's a good excuse.
Yes, it is a good excuse. But I'm paraphrasing right now. Before we leave, I'd like to mention this ministry that was started up by a woman here at Catholic Family Land. She was praying about this crisis in the church with all the scandals that are going on. And she realized that priests and seminarians and they need deacons and they need a lot of prayer. They need our prayers. So she was discerning someone should start some spiritual bouquets to pray for our priests and deacons and our seminarians. So eventually she realized that God was calling her to do that. And so she started a ministry. It's called Spiritual Bouquet Ministry. And you can email her. Her name is Kathy Switzel. She's the organizer, a wonderful woman. And her email is spiritualbouquetministry@gmail.com. You can I'll post this on my Facebook and Instagram so that you can email them for a request to to pray for them and to do that. In the climate of what's going on, I find that the scandal had really lost our momentum. It has devastated the Catholic Church here in America. After 9/11, I thought we were doing pretty good momentum with the priesthood here, but then all of a sudden our momentum was lost because of this scandal, which is very serious. They need prayers, and so I highly recommend going to the website and making sure website as well as the emailing her so that you could be enrolled in the spiritual bouquet. So you want to close up with anything, Kim?
I just want to say, David, first of all, thank you. It's an honor to be with you. It always is, whether we're doing a podcast or not. But one of the big things that I've discovered in my life is to surround myself with holy men and women, holy men especially that that have zeal and have a thirst for holiness and are pursuing that path to sainthood here in this world. And that's been a huge game changer for me. And I know you personally have been that to me, and I want to thank you. And, God puts these secondary causes in our life, right, that speak to us. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that someone as rooted as you are and someone as committed as you are to your faith, certainly the Holy Spirit works through you in talking to me. So just a reminder that we need to be looking and surrounding ourselves with these type of people because they can be game changers for us.
Yes. Excellent point, Kim. And the same with me, with you. I mean, there's a lot of, surrounding yourself with holy people will make you holy. And if you ever look at history, saints came in clumps. So I hope we're one of those clumps, right? Right, Kim?
I'm all for it.
All right, great. So let's finish off with a little prayer, and I'd like to just end it with we say all four. Remember?
Yes.
So all four, the sacred and Eucharistic heart of Jesus, all through the sorrowful and immaculate heart of Mary, all in union with Saint Joseph. That's the prayer that we say here at Catholic Family Land after each decade of the Rosary. So thank you for joining us, and we hope that you'll join us again. Thanks for listening to me, David Cease, at Practical Catholic. Here's a reflection for you. Take a moment and reflect. Am I focused on being holy and growing my family to become holy? Feel free to share your reflection or leave a comment on the podcast, Instagram, and Facebook at Practical Catholic, or visit my webpage at practicalcatholic1, that is the number 1.com. Join me next week as we discuss spiritual dryness.
You're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom